All right, everybody, welcome to another amazing, hopefully amazing, at least adequate episode of the Three View Mirror, your weekly dose of 1 hour of 70s, 80s, and 90s, where one of us throws out three seemingly random topics that at the end of the show we'll bring together in an unexpected way that you didn't see coming, or maybe you did. Today's host is Chelle O'Black, and she's going to take us on a journey back in time, and where it goes, well, with Chelle, we can never be really sure. I'm John Catrides, known as Gen X Jono, throughout my different social media outlets. And my two hosts are here as well. Our first being Chelle, who is hosting. Chelle, introduce yourself.
I'm Chelle O'Black, better known as Gen X Chelle. You can find me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And in general, I love bringing back the memories, the nostalgic memories of the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
And I'm Chris Clues, better known as Chris Clues, keynote speaker and author. I talk about and write about the workplace and life lessons that we can learn from 80s pop culture. I'll throw it back to Chelle since she is our hostess for the day.
Yes, I have three wonderful topics for you here today. I think we're hitting more straight up 80s today with my topics. And I know that I have high hopes today that you're going to be able to put these three things together in our last segment. Our three topics are ALF, MTV, and Knight Rider. And for all of you out there, these two have never heard these topics until just this very moment. So they're hearing them at the same time as you.
Wow.
ALF, MTV, and Knight Rider. We're starting out with ALF.
I was going to say, two of them I can say I've got a lot to talk about. One grated my nerves like very little else. What do you think I didn't like of the three?
MTV.
ALF.
They didn't play enough Wind Beneath My Wings.
Oh, no, they put that on loop, thanks, Chris. But no, ALF. I don't know what it was about that show, but it just irritated me.
You know what? It was, when you look back on it now, you start thinking about what a just absolutely silly concept. And the show was actually a pretty big hit in the 80s. So family comedy.
Yeah. Alien life form, ALF.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you remember his real name on the show? Like, you know, he was ALF, but he also had a real name.
I didn't know that.
It was when he was on his planet, his home planet.
Oh, no, I don't remember it.
No. Do you remember the home planet, John?
Milmac?
No, you didn't
like
watch
that?
it. You hated it.
Was it Milmac?
Milmac.
Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't say I didn't watch it.
It was
I
Milmac.
said I hated it. There's two different things there. Both things can be true. I hated it, and I watched
His name was
it.
Gordon Shumway. Does that ring any bell whatsoever?
Definitely.
Gordon Shumway. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, what I remember about ALF was, because I did a little bit of research on him for one of my books. And at the time, they were really pushing the envelope with the FCC with some of the things that he would say and do.
So it's not even just what they would say, like little plot devices they use. Like, didn't he eat cats?
Well, he wanted to eat the family cat. The family cat's name was Lucky, and and he wanted, every time they would catch him with like the tail in the mouth or something.
And why?
Yeah, so what I find interesting with the 80s and ALF in this category is the amount of shows that had puppets or, you know, I don't know, whatever you want to call them. I mean, even like Harry and the Hendersons, for example, wasn't exactly a puppet, but all the shows that were centered around these non-human characters it's pretty fascinating. And ALF obviously was one of the most popular, but there were a large number of shows. I mean, in comparison today, I think, in terms of like regular shows built around non-human characters.
The Muppet Show. I mean, that's a perennial favorite of most of us, is the Muppet Show. I could watch that. I could go back now and just watch it, and the Muppet movies and the whole bit. And so maybe they found success in the idea that puppets were the thing.
Well, and you got to look at it the other way. It was an inexpensive way. It was a low, there was no CGI, special effects being what they were, to have a character that is central to the plot device that's an alien. You only had a couple choices: really expensive makeup or a puppet. You know, what there really weren't other options out there at the time.
But and I did the research on the show Alf. Of course, I watched it whenever I was younger. I actually kind of liked it. It was one of those family shows that the plot devices with the cat or his, you know, colorful language at times that was like you said, pushing the FCC. Surprisingly, behind the scenes, one of the stars was Max Wright, and he played the dad. And it was said that he absolutely hated being on that set. He hated it. The set was 4 foot off the ground because if you think about it, that's where the puppeteers were underneath.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought it was an interesting fact. They were 4 foot off the ground. So the entire set was built where no matter where Alf popped up, there was there were these trap doors, and they would always have like problems with resetting trap doors. And the show, they were glad to see it end because it took 20 to 25 hours to film a 30, roughly 21-minute episode. And it, because of the puppeteering. And it made me have a lot of massive respect for people that do puppeteering. I don't know how to do it, but I thought I had no idea.
I'm sorry. When we said FCC, I cannot get out of my head. The FCC won't let me be me. I don't know, like Eminem. I just can't get it out of my head. Anyway, no.
You said that in the least Eminem voice possible that I didn't even connect it to his song.
Oh, I can rap Eminem.
I don't think you can.
Prove it. Yep.
I can.
John, he's lying.
I can. I can.
He's lying.
I'll get a bourbon in me. I've done it. I did it. I did it down in Key West karaoke. I can do it.
I think you had a couple drinks in you and you're remembering it differently.
No, I had the whole place going for another day, but I can do it. I'll build one of my episodes around it. But the puppeteering, I'm glad you mentioned that because again, all these shows that were built around the non-human life forms, but also it makes me think of a lot of the movies as well. Like for example, The Dark Crystal. And I think The Dark Crystal was a lot of puppeteering as well, if I recall. And it's fascinating to think about, to your point, how animated the puppeteers can make those puppets themselves. My ringtone on my phone, you guys won't be shocked at this, I'm sure, but for a while it was All Right by Matthew McConaughey, Dazed and Confused, but now it's Mana Mana.
How has a woman not snatched you up? I don't understand how you're just out there in the world, unattached, circulating among all these women, Manama not coming off on your phone, and none of them have snatched you up. Just blows my mind.
I think it drives them away. I think it drives them away when they hear that. But I think about it because I just saw a video of that, to your point, Chelle, that how animated they made just those 3 simple puppets. I think it was Animal, or maybe it was, but anyway, he was going, and then the little ones go doo doo doo, but they almost felt real, which is pretty amazing.
Elves seemed real. I mean, I gotta assume that if you're on the set day in and day out, there comes a point where you stop remembering that you're interacting with a puppet. And it becomes just another member of the cast. Because I know from watching, like I said, I was annoyed by him, but I call it the Gilligan syndrome. As a kid, I was always annoyed by the protagonist that ruined everything. I don't know why. It just raised my childhood anxiety. I wanted them to get off the damn island. I didn't want, the silly, stupid character always irritated me. But I put that irritation on the puppet as if it was a real person. What is so funny? Hold on, why is Chris laughing? What's funny about that?
I'm laughing because I think about, I guess in real life you would have been Carl the neighbor and I would have been Urkel. And I would have annoyed the hell out of you and you would have been the one going, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. What the heck is bothering me? You're bothering me.
What's funny is in my adult life I became that thing that I hated most.
A puppet?
Gilligan.
But there's something to be said for listen, I really love some of the animation now is amazing and incredible. It's really, it's so real. But there is something to be said for the puppeteering, and even before that, the claymation, and right now as we speak, in December here, all of the old school Christmas specials where they had the stop motion. and all of that stuff, and how difficult it is to do that, and how much talent is involved in puppeteering, stop motion, I think they call it, or whatever. But I kind of miss it, to be honest with you. Fraggle Rock was mine.
Was Yoda?
I loved Fraggle Rock. Was who a puppet?
Yoda. Was that puppeteering? Like in Star Wars?
Good question.
I can imagine that it wasn't, but I don't.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in Alf, they had puppeteers that did, underneath of the stage. They were talking about having at least 3 puppeteers at times, but then they would often show long shots. And if you remember the opening segment of Alf, where you see Alf actually walks in to be with the Tanner family in the opening segment, they actually had a 2'9" person in full costume as Alf, and they would use him periodically throughout the show in order to show if Alf was walking away from something or walking towards something.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. I mean, so you're saying they had three people under, like, controlling Alf at the same time?
Yeah, because they would have someone whose mouth, the guy controlled the mouth. And then they would have someone who would control, if he had to use 2 arms, one was usually a human arm, and it was a human arm inside of the costume. And then the other one was usually the stick arm that, so they had to have somebody operating the stick arm and then the real arm that would grab stuff. And then there was the actual puppeting. And for me to think about how puppeteering took that much work was just beyond me. But they tried to save the Alf costuming and all, the actual puppet itself. And you'll never believe, I found this out. I thought it was really cool. So they had a substitute Alf that they actually called Ralph. And that's what they used with rehearsals, because it would stand for Rehearsal Alien Life Form, Ralph. And I thought that was just one of those little things where you find out and you're like, wow, I never knew that.
So Alf had a stand-in.
Alf had a stand-in. He did.
That's
indeed.
wild.
Yeah.
I was thinking while you guys were talking about that part of it, we talked about when we almost got Chris to do his rapping, the FCC thing. There were so many shows, and maybe there still are today, but there was 2 shows going on for a lot of these family shows in the 80s. There was the show that us kids watched and that we focused in on, and then there was the double entendre. There was the thing that had a secondary meaning that our parents would be able to enjoy. And like they were going on simultaneously. And a lot of times as a kid, I'd hear my parents laughing at one part of the show that I'm like, well, what was funny about that? That wasn't funny. He said he was going to go get some balls or something. I mean, it was always just that thing that our parents got that we didn't. And I think a lot of family shows back then did that.
Disney movies have done a lot of that too. I mean, you see a good bit of that. And especially when you go back and you watch some of these shows now as an adult, you're like, oh, now I know what that means. And yeah. Okay, so we've talked about Alf. We're moving on to our second segment now, and we're going to talk about MTV. And I know that this is a big topic that everyone will have something to say about. We could use MTV as a segment over and over and over again, and we would all never run out of things to say.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to start because it's like one of those things where you almost are forced to start in the middle because there's just so much there that it's tough to go back to the beginning. But I will say that MTV was probably most likely right up there with HBO for the 2 biggest reasons I was super envious of anyone who had cable when I was younger. Because in the early years where we lived, not only would my parents not have bothered to spend the money for it, but we didn't have it. I remember entire communities having to wait for cable to get there. And only once it got there were you able to pester your parents in getting it. So I had to watch things like Friday night videos, and like poor man's, we called it poor man's MTV because I wanted my MTV but couldn't get it.
I want my MTV. That's right.
Oh, yeah. I think we've talked about on a previous episode, but I could be wrong, that the first song that came out on MTV and Video Killed the Radio Star and with the Buggles, and how that was Hans Zimmer, the composer who was on the keyboards at 21 years old for the Buggles. I think he was 21. And that's fascinating to me because there are sometimes when you go back and you look at pop culture history where they'll tell you, like, we had no idea that we had something here. But it's kind of hard to believe because if your first video is Video Killed the Radio Star, you have to be pretty confident that you have something that is going to last. And otherwise, I mean, maybe not, but it feels like to me that they knew we've got something here. This is going to take off. I mean, they planted the flag and they were, video killed the radio star. And I mean, it didn't take long for people to start saying like, I come home and I watch these shows on MTV, and thankfully they were all music and not 16 and Pregnant, but that's a whole nother.
Well, they had, we could get to that if you want to, but at one point they did a study when MTV really was music, all about the videos, that 12 to 24-year-olds watched on average something like 2 hours a day of music videos. And I can believe that, because I remember watching it and thinking, I can't wait for my song to come on. And you would just put it on in the background, much like we would put on our other devices now to listen in the background, waiting for your song to come on so that you could run in and you could see that video.
So about, I don't know, not too long ago, I guess I've got a weekly live that I do on Facebook Sunday nights. And I had a co-host who was actually the president of MTV News for like 7 or 8 years. And to your point, Chris, he was talking about they really didn't know. They had no budget. They weren't being picked up by a lot of the cable systems. That's why the whole I Want My MTV was actually a pitch to call your cable subscriber and tell them add MTV to the basic packaging, because it wasn't there. So it was an attempt to get more broadly seen. Like I said, they had no money. The opening sequence with the rocket taking off, the reason they used that is that was in public domain, and they didn't have to pay anything for that when they took off. So a lot of that early stuff was because they had nothing, and they truly hoped they had something. But if you listen to the early VJs, if you listen to the people behind the scenes, it's tough to, hindsight being 2020, it's like, how could it not work? But it had never been done before. They had no money. They had no star power, and they had no product initially, because the bands weren't, a lot of the early videos were concert footage that was reworked. It only took off through Thriller, through Madonna, through the stars themselves making mini movies out of the videos. And that's when it stopped being something we played in the background, to Chelle's point, and really became something that, no, we were sitting front and center and watching these mini movies. Some of them as long as 2 or 3 minutes before the song actually started, they had the storyline behind it.
I didn't realize when there was on the left-hand side, you always saw the name, the album, and the artist, the artist, the title of the song, and the album. And that was where we got a lot of our information. Like, oh, I didn't know that was the name of that album. Oh, I didn't know. I'm going to go buy that album. And that wasn't done before. Even just reading those names was almost like a little bit educational, finding out, oh, now I know who sings that song.
Yeah, and I can say that I got a lot of my introduction to music beyond just the music that was on the radio was because 120 Minutes on MTV, Yo MTV Raps. I mean, these shows that were on, and I was right in front of the TV when they came on, because I wanted to know, what am I missing in music? I think it's, honestly, I thank MTV for why I have such a diverse appreciation for different types of music, because I don't know that I would if not for MTV. It really did a great job exposing all of us to music beyond either the top 40 or maybe music that our particular group or clique would listen to. And I got introduced to all kinds of music. And I love MTV for that. I wish they didn't stop doing music. And of course I loved them for some of the videos too. Like, I mean, I waited for the Twisted Sister videos to come on. I of course waited for Hot for Teacher. That was my favorite video for a long time.
Tawny Katane on the front of the car.
Here I go again.
Yeah.
I mean, Samantha Fox videos were always good. I mean, it was, they owned the 80s in terms of, pop culture. I mean, I really feel like MTV just really owned the 80s.
Headbangers Ball?
Yeah.
That was more YouTube.
Yeah, I love that.
I just would sit and wait. I mean, hoping against hope. Well, bet. Please, just play bet.
Play bet.
Look at the confusion on Chelle's face if you're listening to this and not watching it. Yeah. Wind beneath my wings, babe.
Yeah.
Listen, I didn't, you said play. I thought you said play it back. I'm like, I'm waiting for the
No,
punchline.
Bet.
Play what back?
Bet.
Play bet.
Which was an awesome music video, by the way. She never looked nicer.
Listen, I've never seen the music video because I wasn't obsessed with Wind Beneath My Wings.
You're lost.
She wasn't a good movie though. Ruthless People. That's a very funny,
that was
underrated,
an awesome movie.
Underrated comedy from the '80s. Ruthless People.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about I wish it never stopped playing music. I'm a bit of a hypocrite because I agree that I loved when MTV played music videos exclusively. I thought it was really cool. But Real World, New York, like I remember being a young adult. No, I mean the early ones, you can make a face, Chris, but it was entertaining. It was a time and place when reality television wasn't oversaturated. And if you watch the first couple seasons of that, it was more documentary style than it was let's create fake drama. The drama that showed up really happened. And it was the first and probably most real reality television that there was for a while. And yes, it paved the road for 16 and Pregnant and, you know, a lot of other stuff that me personally, I don't find any, but I enjoyed watching those and they were a big deal.
Jersey Shore.
Yeah.
I only remember one character from Real World, and it was only because he's named after like a piece of sports equipment. Puck.
Oh, yeah.
Name, right? Puck?
Yeah, that was Real World San Francisco. Well, I mean, there was some... Eric Nies went on to do some stuff actually for MTV. He came over from the Real World. There was a United States U.S. Senator from, was it Iowa? I'm not sure where. He just retired. He was one of the actors on the Real World San Francisco, went on to have a career in politics. I mean, pretty decent pop culture stuff coming out of it, for sure.
I think when I asked my husband, I said, what is your memories of MTV? One of the very first things he said, being, you know, a slightly immature Gen Xer, you know, it was Beavis and Butthead. You know, he just starts going, I am the great cornholio.
I need teepee for my bunghole. Yeah.
Oh.
I love Beavis and Butthead.
God, John's the adult.
I didn't like it. That wasn't my thing. I guess I was more mature then than I am now. They annoyed me.
You know, fire.
Yes.
Now you're both annoying me.
I love the cornholio. The cornholio is hilarious. The great cornholio. So I you know, now that you brought that up, I was going to mention something earlier too. There were a lot. There are at least a handful of movie directors that made their start with music videos. And you know, the reason I bring that up is because Mike Judge, who was, you know, created Beavis and Butthead, has gone on to do quite a few things as well beyond that.
So the other thing, if you're a comic book geek, Judd Winnick, which was another character, another actor, another Real World alumnus, went on to become huge in DC comic books, wrote Green Lantern, and was an artist and did a lot of that. So again, for me, because there was an intersection, I've always been a little bit of a political junkie and a comic book geek. It was cool seeing these people come into different parts of my world.
Yeah, and you know, you're right. Like the crossover, that's a big thing for that MTV did with pop culture is that crossover, and you know, where it also again launched a lot of careers outside of music that started within music. And I was looking it up because I knew that there were these great directors, and just looking it up, David Fincher, if you know him, the director for, you know, I mean, Seven is my favorite from him, but Fight Club. I mean, it says here that he did Janie's Got a Gun, Paul Abdul's Straight Up, Madonna's Vogue. And there's a list of like 10 of them right here that, I mean, Spike Jonze, Antoine Fuqua is one of my favorite directors. He did Training Day, if you've seen that, and The Equalizer. And, well, he did Coolio's Gangster's Paradise, did that video. Michael Bay, I mean, he's big. Gus Van Sant. I mean, these are huge names that got their start, you know, with MTV kind of being that launching pad that these directors don't have today.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, but at some point, you know, music television went to being just MTV. Now, you know, they've dropped the music entirely from their repertoire of things. They really only break in for, you know, major events in music. It's not their thing anymore, which
there had to be a reason though, right? There had to be. I mean, MTV, I always say that if something's profitable, if it's something that's going to work, somebody's going to keep doing it. There had to be a reason it dropped off. Like, I wonder, do bands still, they can't possibly be producing, the videos the way they used to, or because there's no, and except for maybe YouTube or Vivo or whatever it is, there's no outlet. But, a good song didn't necessarily mean a good video, and a great video didn't necessarily mean a good song.
Yeah.
Some of the most iconic videos in my memory were from artists I didn't necessarily follow. I mean, he said Madonna's Vogue, and I wasn't a huge Madonna fan. I mean, you cannot discount her impact on pop culture and music and all that. But in terms of me spending my money, because back then we had to spend our money on an album. We couldn't subscribe to have the entire world open to us. We had to go buy an album. And I never bought a Madonna album, but Vogue was iconic. Michael Jackson's Thriller, iconic. And sometimes, like I said, the song was equally iconic. And sometimes you watch it just because the video was awesome.
Yeah.
You waited all day long sometimes for a video to play, especially Thriller. And then remember when they would cut it down and they would make it shorter, and you missed all the good parts of it, the beginning with Vincent Price and the whole bit. And, you only got to see, I have to wait. I have to continue to watch MTV because I have to see the entire Thriller so that I can learn the dance moves. Because prior to MTV, that was the only place that you could do it. And you weren't recording it on your VCR either.
To try the MC Hammer dance and break both my legs. Yeah, I mean, they, and you bring up, again, going back to the crossover and MTV, it is a good question. Like, I don't know when MTV really made that shift from entirely away from music, but there are a lot of music videos on YouTube now. You can, most of them, they still do videos and they just release them on YouTube. And I guess maybe that just made it kind of, MTV was just not they had to find other outlets. But MTV also, they were in the film business as well, because if you remember, I mean, I'm sure there's more than this, but one of my favorite comedies was an MTV film, and that was Office Space.
Yes.
And so, they were finding, to your point, John, other outlets that were, maybe more financially viable than music videos at that time. But I would love to see music videos again. I mean, I loved.
There are channels. MTV2 is that on? That's on my cable subscriber. It's old school MTV type videos.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and
I didn't have that.
Yeah, it's there. I don't watch it, so again, the hypocrite in me, I'm like, I want it back. Oh, it's back. I'm not interested.
Well, they have a whole. I mean, they started the VMAs. I mean, there's the whole. And the VMAs are worldwide, and there's and country music television. They were responsible for all of this. So they, what do they call it? What the CMA, is it the Country Music Awards?
Yeah. Video Music Awards, yeah. Moon Man, which is a moon person now.
CMT channel, I think.
Yes.
The last thing I'll say on the segment is that MTV, Rochelle, to your point, started with music and then moved on to programming, and then to Chris's point, moved on to movies and actually broke through television. It also gave Gen Xers a voice. It amplified our voice because we were the lost generation, the slacker generation. We didn't really have a voice. And then here comes MTV, and it looks it doesn't look as monumental with hindsight looking back, but MTV rocked the vote. And young people never vote in large numbers, but MTV moved the dial on it. And I know some people will say, depending on your political slant, that MTV slants one way or slants the other way. But the truth is, if you look back, their message was just go vote. They brought Bill Clinton on. They brought actual presidential candidates onto MTV and asked them questions that young people had an interest in. And that had never been done before. I mean, there was the moment where they asked Bill Clinton if he wore boxers or briefs, which kind of brought that down. But it made news. It made public events, current events, politics accessible to us, and also made our voice accessible to each other, which if there's anything that I look back on and say my favorite part of MTV, ironically, it's not the music or the programming. It's the fact that the first time I felt seen as a young adult, I'm like, holy crap, this is about me.
I think of it as the rebellion too.
Yeah.
MTV kind of hit popularity as Gen X was hitting those years when we were feeling that rebellion, teenagers to early 20s. And MTV wasn't afraid to tackle certain topics and probably still isn't. I haven't watched it in years. I mean, I'll be honest with you, but they were the rebellion that we wanted to be. So they gave us wings. Not wind beneath my wings, but wings.
I mean, I also think to John's point, MTV News with Kurt Loder, I mean, there was actually a news segment and it went beyond music. And so we did actually have an outlet for news because we weren't watching the ABC nightly news at 6 p.m. but MTV News with Kurt Loder, yeah, I'm in. I'll watch it.
Every hour on the hour on the
every
nines.
hour on the hour. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, wasn't it? Yeah, it was like 5 minutes or whatever. Yeah, on the was it?
It was on the nines.
On the nines. Sure. Yeah, I mean, so you're right in that respect. Although I will say that was the educational aspects of MTV was not my favorite. Mine was, David Lee Roth, California Girls, etc. But that was me. And and like I said, Twisted Sister. I also think I would say that one more thing about MTV, or two more quick things. One is it gave bands and musicians who may not have had an opportunity because if they created a cool video and maybe the song was okay, but the video was great, whatever, there was an outlet for them to be able to get their music out. And there wasn't a lot of ways to do that. And when MTV was looking for different types of artists, if you had a friend with a camera, which in the 80s that was possible for the first time, you could submit a video of your music, and now it's just people just upload it to YouTube. But back then, that was a way for, I wonder how many bands and musicians that we know today that were kind of alternative or smaller got that exposure that they would not have gotten before. I think it's kind of interesting that they gave us that platform as well. And that was the great innovation in the 80s, the opportunity, the accessibility to be able to get your creative out there. And MTV was an outlet for that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it was.
Well, the only other thing I was going to say is the amount of people that also got their start. I've forgotten, somebody shared with me an old show that Jon Stewart had early on. It was You Wrote It, You Watch It or something. And that was the first time I'd ever seen Jon Stewart. And there were tons of moments like that where we were introduced to people through MTV that went on to do a lot bigger, grander stuff. That's all.
Okay, gentlemen, so we've talked about Alf and we've talked about MTV, and now we need to get to our third segment, which is Knight Rider. And I know both of you had to have been fans of Knight Rider, but my question, before we even get into it, is who was the star of Knight Rider?
David Hasselhoff.
Kit.
Well, Kit the car, I guess, maybe. Like Kit the car
Kit was the star. I mean, the Hoff was the Hoff. But as far as Knight Rider goes, Kit was the star of the show.
I knew one of you would say that. I knew one of you would say it. Like Hoff was the window dressing. He was the, and at the time, and he's still a nice looking man, don't get me wrong, but at the time he was just hot stuff. He was, everybody loved the Hoff. Remember the jokes about how the Hoff was popular in Germany? Like he was a superstar in Germany.
He still is. Did you just say hot stuff?
She did.
Hot stuff. I mean, listen, going back to the conversation we had with Alf about all of these shows that were centered around non-human characters. And I hadn't really thought about it in this context, but because you brought up Alf, because you brought up Knight Rider, there were a ton of those. And I don't know if there's really much of that anymore. And it was kind of cool, actually.
Little hidden connections, that's not it, because obviously we can't fit MTV in there, but those little hidden connections about inanimate or, non-real things being the stars of a show, that would be another one of those tiny little connections that we make. And one I forgot to mention too, was that Alf, believe it or not, was actually one of the hottest shows. Guess where? Germany. And I found that tiny little connection right there. I thought, well, that's pretty fascinating. It's not the answer, but they're those small connections we always make.
So let's see. There's a lot of like trivia with Knight Rider. So KIT was Knight Industries 2000.
Yes.
That was the acronym. I don't know why 2000, but okay. And I love that, like, it starts the pilot episode, the premiere episode of Knight Rider falls into so many like 80s era television tropes, like the change my face trope. Like almost every show in the 80s, somebody at some point, whether an actor over negotiated his contract and was let go, or for whatever reason, but one of the main characters would undergo surgery and they'd give him a completely different face, which to this point, despite the facelifts in Hollywood that we see, I don't think we can do that yet. But they were all doing it in the 80s, and there was a different actor that played Michael Knight in the opening episode before he got Hoff's face. Mm-hmm. And I got to say, to Chelle's point, if I'm going to have major reconstructive surgery to give me a whole new face, David Hasselhoff's would probably be a good choice.
Hot stuff. See, you're allowed to say it, John. You're allowed to say it. Just hot stuff.
Hot stuff.
It's a whisper.
There's also like, the product marketing around these shows when it came to, Knight Rider and Alf as well, but in particular Knight Rider. There were plenty of kids under the Christmas tree or on their birthday who were getting something around Knight Rider, whether it was, a little KIT the car, Matchbox car, or it was the action figure that we've talked about action figures in the past as well. There was a lot of product marketing around that show. And that was really, I guess there was a little bit of that in the 70s, but really in the 80s, it just kind of exploded because they made a show and then they're like, okay, how do we make toys out of this?
Yeah. Yeah, and do you remember they had the mobile command center, and the KIT would just it was a big interesting thing to see a car rolling into another moving car at that time. It was fascinating. It was something that you hadn't really seen before. It was the Flag Mobile Command Center. It was
the big semi.
It was a big semi. Yeah, and
I'd forgotten about that. And speaking tropes, it just occurred to me, like I was trying to think, what's your favorite KIT episode? Another big 80s trope, 70s trope was always the evil twin. You always saw it, like where in Bewitched, she had her cousin or sister, whoever it was. They just put Samantha in a dark wig, and now she's the evil twin. I Dream of Jeannie, she had her evil twin, same actor. And KIT, as the star of the show, had his evil twin, which was Karr, Karr, I think. It was the evil version of KIT. And it was just another trope that, they fell into. And it was one that it just was cool to me. And that's probably my favorite episode. I just remember being really excited that it was KIT versus Karr. And again, they were toys, Chris. You could buy KIT, you could buy Karr.
I remember looking backwards when you look inside the technology at the time to put into that car. I remember watching this show thinking, wow, look at the inside of that car. It's so amazing, KIT. Oh, I want one of those. It was a Pontiac Trans Am, which I wanted anyway. But the look back now, and it's just a bunch of like LED lights. And, you see it and you're like, wow, that was not very advanced. But at the time it was.
Yeah, at the time it was. That was back when, the cool car was people getting a Fiero. Of all things. So, it was definitely, and there was something that one of you, the evil twin. My mind goes to, of the Friends episode with Dr. Drake Ramore and his evil twin when they had Brooke Shields.
Yeah.
and they're all throwing the water in his face.
But I
and you left the toilet seat up, you bastard.
And those were like some of my favorite 80s era moments, though, were those tropes. There was the evil twin trope. There was the change your face trope. There was the hit on the head with and you got amnesia trope where the main character forgets everything. which to my knowledge, I don't think has ever happened to anyone, but right down to Happy Days, I think every single show at some point, someone got bopped on the head and now they forgot everything about their lives. There was the going blind trope. Again, usually a head injury or something would temporarily render them blind. It was just kind of neat. And we would watch them go from episode to episode, show to show. And they were some of my favorite episodes that would fall into these tropes. And I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, Little House on the Prairie, I think did. Oh no, she was blind in the show.
No, she woke up blind. She got blind.
She woke up blind. Yeah,
that was a horrifying moment in my young life when Mary Ingalls woke up screaming, "Pa, Pa, I can't see." I mean, that was. I remember practicing as a kid, closing my eyes and trying to get from like one room to the next. Did you guys ever practice being blind just in case it happened?
No, in my it was younger in my school, they actually taught us I don't think they do it now. I don't think there's time in the curriculum, but that's a whole nother topic, where they taped our thumbs in and they had us try to do different tasks. They put these special headphones over us. They were trying to do disability training and disability things to get us to understand what it might be like to be disabled in some way. And they had all of us in elementary school doing these things. I thought it was fantastic. I wish they'd bring that stuff back.
I actually think that's a really good idea. And unfortunately, at my school, all they did was give us an egg and say, go take it home and it's your baby.
Oh, I remember the egg baby.
I was just going to go back to the coolness of the car that you talked about with Kit, with all of the interior and the cool things that were going on. And again, like now I think about shows that were centered around cars or transportation, because you had the General Lee, you had Magnum PI's Ferrari, you had you had Kit, you had the A-Team's van, and I'm sure there are a lot more of them that were centered around, or at least had a character that was a vehicle. And that was what that show was known for, which is kind of cool.
One of Rochelle's videos that she has out on her social media platform, I think one of the ones that you did that probably performed really, really well, was centered around like the cars that were in the shows. And she did that. She showed all of those vehicles. And to your point, Chris, that video did ridiculously well because a lot of us have sentimental attachments to those cars. They were so cool. Even going all the way back to like Starsky and Hutch's car, those the cars were co-stars of the show.
The Gran Torino. Yeah. But that video was extremely popular for me on almost all of my social media channels. So it's out there somewhere.
Okay.
There was a period in time where it became really popular too. Like one of the things that started happening outside the shows were the two-tone vehicles, where they started painting the bottom half of the car one color. And I hated when they did that to Kit. When Kit got a third or fourth or fifth season, it wasn't just a black Pontiac Trans Am anymore. The bottom was like gray. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Gold? I was in my head, I was thinking gold.
I thought gold too, but maybe
I'm pretty sure it was silver or gray. But in any event, I remember as a kid hating it. I wanted the car to be like just this sleek. I'm like, why? It didn't need to be done. But I think that was a jump the shark moment. The minute they painted Kit, and that was it for the show. It was over.
One of my favorite iconic things about the show was when Kit talked and the little red light beamed across the front of it. I can remember as a kid being fascinated, thinking, I want a car that can talk to me. And the funny thing is, though, we say we haven't made it that far, but the truth is there's a lot. My car can talk to me. I mean, you can put an Alexa in your, she's going to trigger now. You can put an Alexa in your car. You can put, you can get your car to talk back to you. I get Siri to talk to me all the time. And, I tell her what to do, so she talks back to me. So in a sense, Siri and Alexas and Googles have all been input into our lives kind of, and they do what Kit did, other than, I don't know. Well, Kit had indestructible windows and,
no, they're there.
Kill any other car.
But think about it. What would Michael ask of Kit? Kit, find me the fastest way to get XYZ wherever I'm going. And I mean, GPS. Now the interesting thing is I think there was actually a satellite. I think Knight Industries had a satellite in the sky that allowed Kit to do that. And that was before we had global positioning satellites, which is, sometimes I forget that GPS is an acronym, but we'd get used to saying it. But yeah, those things that Michael would ask of Kit absolutely happen today. The diagnostics behind the scene, cars being able to tell us what's wrong with them. That's all there. There's not much that's not.
And trapping us. Let's not. I mean, everything that we do tracks us everywhere that we go.
And at least like with Kit and Knight Rider, he was asking it to do really cool things, because one of my favorite cartoons was the Wonder Twins, but I always got frustrated because it was like form of an eagle in a bucket of water. Like, this sucks. Like, be like a Tyrannosaurus Rex and a meat cleaver. Like, that's what I want to see. Like, I want to see some kind of destruction and cool stuff happen. Like,
yeah, but Zan couldn't be a meat. I guess it could be an ice meat cleaver. That was Zan's power was pathetic. Zan could only turn into water. Jaina could be any animal she could imagine. He had to be water.
Yeah.
Or ice or
But
steam.
She was almost always an eagle, and he was like water with eyes in the bucket. And I'm like, come on, man. Like, you guys could be any, like, this is ridiculous. Like, I want, flying dinosaurs and weapons. Like,
so there was a takeoff on the Wonder Twins that was really cool, though, that reimagined them in DC Comics as villains. And I don't remember which Elseworld story it was, but Zan would do really like horrible things. Like, he would turn into water vapor, and then you'd breathe him in, and then he would turn into ice spikes, and it would just be all these ice spikes. I mean, he was a lot more powerful than we ever thought he could be with things like that, but they couldn't put that on the Super Friends.
I love it. They almost had a Wonder Twins movie. There was a Wonder Twins movie that was going to be produced, and then it got canceled. And it's really unfortunate, because that's where I think we could have gotten the Tyrannosaurus Rex and the meat cleaver and just seen what happens. Anyway, back to Kit. But that's the thing. Like, he could ask Kit to do really cool stuff. And I got to wonder, John, just kind of put this in my head when he talked about GPS. I mean, you got to wonder, like, did they have, with some of these shows, did they have like a military consultant on the show who kind of knew this stuff was already available and was like, hey, this isn't going to be in the public for 20 years, but everybody's going to think there's no possible way this could happen. So I'm not really giving away any secrets. I don't know.
I'd almost have to say, yeah, because some of that technology is much older than we actually think that it really is.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say no. Yeah. I'm going to say it was like a Star Trek scenario where it's science fiction until it becomes science fact. But every invention ever made was imagined before it existed. So I think we've always had the ability to imagine things that later become reality.
Except there's a big difference between GPS and teleporting.
We'll teleport someday.
You think?
I wouldn't do it.
Teleporting. I'll never listen. Teleportation. I just have to go back to The Fly with the one with what's his face.
Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, there was that thing terrified me. Listen, I'm never teleporting. I'm going to be afraid there'll be some worm in there or something, and I'm not like a worm shell. All right, gentlemen, we've talked about so many things here today. We talked about Alf. We talked about MTV. We talked about Knight Rider. Now, it is your job and the job of our listening audiences or our watchers that are on YouTube to come and think about how did all of these three things relate? Because, of course, that's the three-view mirror. We look backwards in order to look forwards. And these three things have something in common. What is that thing or concept or whatever you want to call it? How are they related?
Chris, you got anything?
No, I mean, I don't. I thought MTV, Alf, and Kit were all three letters, but that's
okay. And that's literally a minute ago.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. It is four.
Yeah. Literally 1 minute ago, yes. I was thinking about, cause so often while we're talking, at the end of the episode, someone makes the reveal, and then we're like, oh my God. And we mentioned that was that. And we said that this was that. How did we not get it? We touched on it. And this probably isn't it, but I started thinking about the things that we said. And we were like, Elf, alien life form. And then, I said that, MTV, music television, but it went beyond its acronym. We even talked about GPS, and I'm like, I forgot that was an acronym. And then we look at Knight Rider, and Kit was an acronym. And I think things enter our lexicon, enter our language, enter our pop culture, and we forget they actually stand for something else. And every one of these things went far beyond their acronyms. People forgot Elf stood for something. So I thought maybe they're all acronyms that we grew up with in the 80s.
John, I need a drum roll. We need a drum roll whenever we do.
You got it?
He's correct. It was the acronym. It was the hidden idea that each one of these things is Alien Lifeform, MTV Music Television, and Knight Industries 2000. And then even inside of there, the car, flag, the Foundation for Law and Government that was formed inside the Knight Rider. There were so many acronyms throughout that was the actual connection. So you Yay! I don't even know. I'm like, I had a hint that you knew about it when you mentioned car and GPS, and I thought he's going to get this. He's going to get this, and if you didn't, I was going to say you had it. It was
And
right
that's what
there.
brought me to it. As I started thinking to myself, all right, every time we haven't gotten one of these, if we go back, we realize we had. And I'm like, KIT was an acronym and car was an acronym. And it literally came to me as I was asking Chris if he had thought of anything. And those watching on YouTube might even see it come on my face because it literally at the last second. But it would have really irked me if it didn't, because we were dancing all around it all through the episode.
I told you about Ralph, the rehearsal alien life. I was hinting around at this. I worried that I was hinting too much.
No,
but you got it.
Well done. I was, when I said, like, Alf and KIT and MTV, but I was around it, but not directly over the target.
And there was something inherently cool about acronyms. And maybe even a little bit today, but things like Chelle and I have done work for AARP, and that's an acronym, but it's a company that's getting away from its acronym. They're like, it doesn't stand for anything, because they're trying to grow beyond retired people. Not a plug for AARP, by the way, just a great example. And it's today, the acronyms don't mean anything. MTV is still MTV, but it's not music television. They've abandoned what the acronym is. But in the 80s, there was something really cool about shortening things and having cool little acronyms. And, they built concepts around, okay, come up with a word. And the word came first. They're like, now what acronym can we create to get to the word we want? Like, I'm sure car was the concept idea for the twin. And then they had to back into what letters can become that for us. MASH.
MASH was MASH was I can't think of it. Tell me what I can't
ambulance, mobile. Anyway,
my dad would know this one because I had to watch MASH and Andy Griffith every night at dinner. I would say when I was little. I mean, also, like, we were taught an acronym. So KISS, Keep It Simple Stupid, was one that I never forgot, and also meant kids in Satan's service as well. If you had religious people around you, KISS, the band KISS was like, oh, that means kids in Satan's service. I'm like, what?
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. We used the girls all did one called SWAT, SWAT, which was sealed, or a SWAT. Sorry, SWAT. Sealed with a kiss. We would,
Oh, I do remember that one.
Yeah. We put SWAK at the end of every one of our, because of course we passed notes in school, and we put that at the end of every one of our notes.
And there was SAD, Students Against Drunk Driving, and MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And I think even DARE was an acronym. I just don't remember what it stood for. Maybe it wasn't.
Me neither.
But at any rate, there were tons of, I was in FBLA, and people were, which is Future Business Leaders of America, and FFA, Future Farmers of America. It just, acronyms were everywhere when we were kids growing up. And I'm sure people in the comments are able to add, their own that they remember, but it was just the way things were. Yeah.
Yeah.
When we at our age, we were talking in acronyms a lot of times. We were using a lot of acronyms and words that our parents didn't know. And it was obviously by design. So they didn't know sometimes what we were talking about, or if they found something, they're like, what does this mean? No idea.
If we bring it to today, that's like the emojis. I mean, emoji combinations, they can mean a whole lot of things. And, and so each generation has their little language.
Acronyms still become code. I know when my daughter was first texting, there were these things online you could look at that were telling you what your kids meant when, like, I couldn't figure out, my daughter kept calling somebody a piece of shit, POS. Whenever I'd look at her phone, I'd see POS. And I'm like, but it really meant parent over shoulder. So it was code to the other person. Don't text anything you don't want my parents to see. They're watching. And I'm like, who are you calling a piece of shit? She's like, Dad, you don't need to know. But it was code.
And the bands too. Like, I mean, there were, I'm sure, more mainstream bands than this, but a band that I listened to, a punk rock band that I listened to, was TSOL. That's how they were known, but the acronym was True Sounds of Liberty.
Okay.
And so you had a lot of these, particularly in the punk rock area. So you had a band called DRI, which was Dirty Rotten Imbeciles, JFA, which was Jodie Foster's Army. Like, you had all of these different bands
Rap
in the
did
punk.
it too. NWA, you had, I think REM technically, the band, that was an acronym. It's just because it wasn't
Mhm.
REM, but I don't know if it stood for rapid eye movements or they just thought it was a cool acronym without meaning, but I remember that.
Yeah, so
Yep.
I mean, imagine bringing everything back around to an acronym. I when this one came to me, I thought it was a pretty decent way to, look backwards and then look forwards at all of the things that. And now I think I'm going to pay more attention how many acronyms are out there now. I'm not in pop culture right now. I don't live inside of Gen Z's pop culture. I see it and I observe it, but I don't live it. And that's why, I live in my version of pop culture. Chris, you live in your version of pop culture in the past. It was the most meaningful to us. And I'm curious what Gen Z is going to say a couple of years from now when they are 20 more years later, looking back at their pop culture and the things that they would say.
Probably emojis. Like we went, we were acronyms. As I said, like our parents may have been like the Pig Latin. We were the acronyms. They dabbled. I think acronyms are still around, but a lot of it is emojis.
I remember a story though, speaking of acronyms, and it's just kind of a generational thing. My husband's family, a member of his family, very, very, very into dogs. You would appreciate this, Chris. So anytime a dog passed in their little community, because they actually took their dogs on dates and things like that, a dog passed. And so she was texting back and they said, oh, your dog passed. And she kept sending LOL, 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 LOL to the person whose dog died, until finally somebody, I guess, told her it doesn't mean lots of love. It means and I felt and that story goes down in our family. It was a fun story.
Well, and I think my sister-in-law for years, until I finally told her to stop it, if she was laughing really hard, she would write LOL. That's not, stop doing that.
I love the connection, and it's great because it does take me back to some of the things that we said, how we said them, how we wrote them. And I think it's cool too. Like, it's just, like you said, what is Gen Z going to be thinking about 20 years from now? Is it going to be that they talked in a lot of emojis? And even today, like, I watched some documentary the other day. I love like historic documentaries. I was watching on this cave of the unknown that they found, and that people talked in hieroglyphics. They did it on the wall, and how cool was that? And then the cave paintings before that. And so it's just watching that evolve, but not really evolve. We've always looked for ways to tell stories in a shorter way than telling the whole story. And that's pretty cool.
Chris, you just brought me to a realization. So what was going on in the late 80s, early 90s that really helped acronyms specifically take off? How were a lot of us communicating?
Pagers.
So
Yeah.
we had to come up with shortening things. I think that's what the precursor for the texting. The texting then took it to another level. So before emojis, and it was strict texting, that's where LOL, LMFAO, all of those things came up because you were limited to characters. We were texting on, kids won't remember, but our phones, it wasn't letters. It was 3 letters under every number. So it took forever to get a text through. So we had to shorten everything.
Yeah.
Some texting plans you paid by character, I think.
Yeah.
Or at least by text. So you had to get your point across quickly, not only because size was limited, space was limited, time was limited, and cost was unlimited because you paid for every text. So we had to make it all. So I think, to our point looking forward, the acronyms were big in the 80s. I'd forgotten they only got bigger in the late 80s and 90s.
The pagers. Oh my God.
Pagers.
Yeah.
I'm so embarrassed by that moment in my life having a pager. I
had
look
one
back
too.
now. I'm like,
I'm embarrassed how often I added 911 to just about everything.
Yes.
I'm embarrassed how you could spell boobs or hell. Remember that?
Right. That's right.
You could spell either one of them if you turned it upside down.
So, Chelle, completely unrelated. For those that listen to us on Spotify, apparently people can leave comments on the Spotify site as well. And I got a message yesterday that somebody else remembered the alien letter. So we have 2 seemingly independent collaborators letting us know that you are not insane. They remembered it as well.
I am indeed not insane. I thought for sure one of you was going to bring that up when we were talking about acronyms, about whether there was any acronyms in the alien letter. Well, I don't remember, but I just remember it's out there. And now I have two valid people who also remember it. So win-win.
Yeah, and that's a reminder for those that are watching on YouTube. If you have a long commute, if you got a trip coming up, you can also take us with you along your journey by listening to us on iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, or just about anywhere you listen to any podcast. And I think that pretty much wraps us up for the day, guys. Any final thoughts?
Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to subscribe and like us as well. We always appreciate when you like us.
And leave us comments. We'd love to hear your ideas. We like to hear what connection you thought it was, what connection, if you had any clue, or even if you find a connection that we didn't know about. There might be hidden connections within some of these episodes that even we didn't think about. So please leave us a comment and let us know.
So until next week, this is John Catrides signing off, saying keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars.
And this is Rochelle signing off.
Stay rad, everybody.